right. Beyond the logo, we're going to do this, Mike, right? We talked about it, and now we're kicking the show off.
We are doing this, Todd.
What are we going to talk about?
I don't know. Should we do real brief introductions of each other?
That sounds good. Go
I,
for it. Go
I,
for it. This
well,
is your world. This is fandom.
okay. So my name is Mike Lewis, and I'm a professor who studies fandom and my day job is at Emory University, the Goizueta School of Business. And Todd, yourself?
So, not an academic, video game person. And yeah, for me, this is a chance to kind of talk out loud around what we're doing building fandom, right? We make video games and we have an org that plays video games, tries to be famous over the internet. So this whole topic of fandom that I got to know by speaking in your class is kind of fascinating. So I'm glad we get to explore it together.
No, absolutely. I think the Venn diagram of our interests connects in a really interesting place, right? So I'm coming at this from a data perspective or an analytical perspective. You're actually out there doing this stuff for real. So the connection is great. And I think what's important as we get rolling on this is that the connection is that what we're both interested in is cultural impact, right? That's what the world's all about now. Influence, impact. And so, to me, this podcast is going to be about an exploration of how you make a cultural impact, how you resonate with people, how you do something that people care about.
I love it. And we're going to have guests in the future, but we're going to start, I think, for today and talk about the lane of gaming, that is video gaming, that I live every day. And you've done a lot of work around how it's the same or different from things like traditional sports, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to start out we need to start out by putting a stake in the ground about what we know best. And yeah, gaming something that you really kind of introduced me to. I mean, I'm of the age where there was an Atari in my house, right? But you were the first person that really convinced me or let me know that, man, this was something big. This was a cultural movement, or this was a vibrant subculture where people were really loved this stuff.
I love it. Yeah, and of course, we're about the same age, but I just happened to grow up in a tech-forward household. And so for me, it was like we had Pong, like literally the first Pong,
Yeah.
Magnavox Odyssey on the big TV, and playing Space Invaders with my dad, and then going to the neighborhood arcades with the kids. And I never gave it up, really.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I think it's relevant, right? Because when you think about why there's a fandom in anything, football, basketball, music, or video games, that what is the core to that? And to me, it's I talk about it. So I'm going to use these words a lot. That there's a foundation of fandom, and that's the stories that are out there embedded in a subculture. So people of our generation, we've got these stories of having Atari Space Invaders in our house, right? And that's something that we can share. And then you've got, since you stuck with it, you've got 40 years more stories, right?
yeah.
Connecting across all generations.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, stories are powerful, and
Yeah.
the game that we ended up making that was kind of what we're known for back at another studio called Smite was leveraging mythology and stories that have
Yeah.
been with humans for tens of thousands of years, right? So yeah, it's pretty powerful. So well, let's dive into gaming. I know you
Okay.
came today with some questions for me about gaming, and also with some data about gaming and fandom. So I don't know. Should we start with the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so when I put the questions together, part of where I was coming at it from was thinking about how I could learn from you,
Hmm.
right? And learn from you about this subculture, this gaming subculture. But the other thing that I really want to get to is your experience running a team,
Hmm.
because I gotta tell you, I've got sort of broad interest in all this, and nothing makes me happier than efforts to come up with a name for a new team,
Hmm.
right? I love expansion leagues, I love expansion franchises, and so that idea of building something from the ground up, or building it to some new level, is absolutely fascinating to me in terms of creating those relationships and those communities.
Cool. I love it. And again, what I appreciate about you is you've literally written a book, multiple books on this topic. And so for those of us who every day are in one silo, like gaming, the chance to pick our heads up and see, oh, what are people doing with fandom in
Yeah.
sports and in music? Anyway, hopefully we'll learn something along the way and take the audience along on the journey with us.
Okay. Well, I'm going to deviate from the questions I
Cool.
sent you,
Let's do it.
and so just as you said that, this notion that you live in a silo of gaming. Okay, so how do you think about the gaming subculture? And I'm going to give you too broad of a question. That how does gaming compare to sports? Gaming fandom compare to sports? How does it compare to television or movie fandom or all the different fandoms out there? Because to me, it strikes me as a bit of a hybrid.
It is a hybrid. So number one, while I spoke quickly and said silo, I do think one of the most useful ways to frame gaming, and this is not my concept, this was just in a report from Dentsu, this big advertising agency, but they said gaming is not a vertical, it's a horizontal. And I do think that similar to, in some ways even more so, than movies or music or sports, where it's connecting commonality across a lot of pretty unique and differentiated subgroups, that's the number one way to think about gaming. So, to your question, if you say conjure up the image of a sports fan or a movie lover, there might be some things that are in common, but it'd probably be more specific to say a fan of baseball versus tennis, or a fan of rom-com movies versus horror movies versus action flicks. Now you're starting to get some, because no one really identifies as a movieer because it's too broad, but we talk about like, oh, the gamer. But the reality is the Fortnite gamer and the Call of Duty gamer and the League of Legends gamer, and for that matter, the Candy Crush or Wordle gamer, like they're all pretty darn different. So that would be my first kind of response to that, is you really need to double click in and say, well, what type of gamer to get to
so
bit of fandom.
You got to go granular.
It's right. At least one level deeper.
You really got to drill down. So when I think about decomposing fandom, or sort of, because absolutely you're right. People want fandom is an interesting word because everyone knows what a fan is.
Yep.
You know what a fan is.
Yep.
But then I say, well, is there a difference between a sports fan and a movie fan? Absolutely. Is there a difference between a basketball fan and an MLB fan? Is there a difference between rom-com? Absolutely agree.
So just to dig into that a little bit, just general fan, because you've done a ton of work on this, right? Like, I guess I think about like passion. I think about a little bit of like community, almost maybe tribalistic. Like those are some of the words I think that are.
Yeah.
Are there any other key things you think about there?
Well, I want to avoid coming at this like making people drink from the fire hose, right? When I teach a class on fandom, the words, and so as we do this podcast, you're going to get tired of me saying the words community, identity, community, and identity over and over again. But where I was going in terms of thinking about how to break fandom apart is I came up with an acronym a while back that I called WILD. W standard for We Fandom. And so in sports, there's a lot of we fandom. When your team wins the World Series, that's all about we.
Yep.
Right? And so bringing this back where we'll eventually go, when Ghost wins a championship, do Ghost fans say, we won?
Yeah. Right? If we're doing our job right, they totally do. Yeah.
And I think we fandom is it's like the pinnacle.
Yep.
And that sports gets that, maybe movies don't. The I stands for influences. So what are the influences that bring you to a fandom?
Yep.
Local media, peer effects, algorithms. The L is lifespan, essentially. So life cycle for both the product and the consumer. And then the D is propensity to display.
I'm big D.
You're
today.
displaying.
Yeah.
But there are fandoms where people don't want to do that, right?
Secret club. Yeah.
But no one's reluctant to, and so when I break it down into these things, then I can start to kind of say, well, sports or baseball is a little different than basketball or Taylor Swift, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, I got a bunch of questions, but we
Okay.
won't get too academic and nerdy about that. So, yeah, so I mean, I think when it comes to gaming and the way we're
Hmm.
thinking about fandom, one is we think, okay, gaming is this really broad opportunity, like 3.2 billion gamers on planet Earth, but maybe too broad to attack in a single with a single brush. And so just like with film or with sports, we tend to think, okay, there are different genres that have similar patterns, a first person shooter or a strategy game or a role playing game. And then you can think about different attributes as a general
Hmm.
rule of, okay, what type of folks like first person shooters versus
Yeah.
sports games, right? And then we think about specific games,
Yeah.
because the reality is, in my view, the specific game is kind of the heat of the fandom for a point in time, right?
Yeah.
So if you're obsessed about Fortnite and someone else is obsessed about Rocket League, you're different fans, and so yeah, it's one of the things we think about a lot is how many games to focus on, which games to focus on, because a
Yeah.
lot of the consumer attachment, in my view, is starts with that game.
Okay, and so that totally makes sense to me, and I think it's an important point in all this, right? So unlike something that's relatively simple, like I'm rooting for a sports team in a given league, you have a I don't know that I've ever said this out loud, but in marketing we talk a lot about sort of the value chain, how value is created. When I've thought about the video game universe, I think it's almost more like a cloud,
Hmm.
if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense, where you have the publisher,
Mm-hmm.
you have the influencers, you have the gamers, you have the commentators, and then you probably have all sorts of other things in this universe.
Yep.
And that brings me to this notion of kind of this idea of this community.
Yep.
And so I think what you're getting at is Ghost is a team,
Yep.
but they're touching these different communities.
That's right. Exactly. Fundamentally, we think of ourselves being in the community building business, right? We are a social layer of both belonging and aspiring, back to your
Hmm.
W of
Yeah.
win, that is around certain games. And we have to be pretty deliberate around which games we're going to invest in because it's more than just one game, but it's not quite every game. That would dilute our focus and our brand too much. But you're right. When you're a game developer in your cloud, you're focused on publishing this game and
Hmm.
driving monetization, engagement, fandom around that game. Our belief, kind of, just backed up by how people are spending their time, is gamers, they do want to connect over this shared passion, and so that's
Okay.
what we're doing with Ghost. We're
Okay, so
building
they
that
want to
community.
connect with each other.
That's right. The type of gamer that we're going after. So just to be really clear, because sometimes
Hmm.
this gets lumped together, and in the same way, there may be a gamer that just enjoys a single player immersive game,
Hmm.
maybe on a platform like virtual reality. It's just them and the sense of presence, and that's what it's about. But more and more gamers objectively see gaming as like this fourth place or third place, their hangout, the new version of the bowling alley. And so gamers that are playing Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite, it's the social is coming first. And so we're trying to add value to that.
Okay, so just to keep the example
Yep.
clean, if I'm going to use one of those games, which one should I use?
Let's use Fortnite.
Fortnite. Okay, so if I'm the publisher of Fortnite, it's like I've built this infrastructure. And then it sort of goes out there into the wild. And I've got guys like you and Ghost, and I've got all sorts of other influencer types, people that are publishing on Twitch that are building that community. And it's an interesting thing because I suspect that in some ways the community is something that at least originally or mostly still is something that's being built organically, people wanting to come together, but then inevitably there's going to be a commercial implication in all that, right?
Yep.
Because Fortnite wants to get bigger and everyone wants to Everyone wants to make some money.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. So the game publisher, Epic Games, who makes Fortnite,
Okay.
to stick with our example, really their business incentives are to uh, acquire new users at a reasonable
Hmm.
price, to retain those users
Okay.
so they're not leaving, they don't have a leaky, kind of funnel, and then to figure out a way to make money from a percentage of those users to monetize them, right? And those are their goals. And so
Well, can I
oh yeah,
interrupt you?
yeah, sure.
But they've got you sort of working for them,
That's right.
but you're independent of them,
That's right.
right? And so you're evolving on the outside.
Yeah,
And so there's a little bit of you're playing a complementary function to them.
correct. Yeah, that's right. So one of the biggest, things that people new to the, let's call it the esports world, that we try to remind those is no one owns the game of basketball or football. Someone does own every video
Hmm.
game. So we could say we're going to make a new 3v3 basketball league tomorrow, and we don't need anyone's permission. But for us to set up our 3v3 tournament or event series or league around Fortnite or any other video game, we need a relationship with the game publisher because they actually own it. So that does make it different. You're building a business on someone else's land, and you have to be aware of that. And so, but it doesn't, it's different. I don't think it's a disadvantage. It's just different because we are complementary in a working ecosystem. So back to your,
Yeah.
so Epic, Fortnite, the more people that play Fortnite, that's a win for them. The more people that are invested enough to spend money, that's a win for them. And so for us, we're working on how are we not just adding value to them, but how can we build a business around Fortnite fandom in this case,
Hmm.
right? An affiliation with Ghost. And there's fortunately a lot of ways that that can be done.
Okay. So there's it's a little bit of a complicated thing, right? And so I think it's straightforward, but then when you get down to the nuts and bolts, your incentives are aligned. You both want Fortnite to do great, but it's their sandbox.
Yep.
And so how do they view you guys? And really, how do they view the whole community, right? They want the community to be vibrant, but they also want to be crass, take as much out of the community. There's a sharing issue, and sharing is always difficult.
Yeah, 100%. So you're right. You're hitting on one of
Yeah.
the biggest challenges of this esports world. And first I'll say every game publisher that has the IP rights, they're totally different in the way they think about these. Some of them are very laissez-faire and basically like go do whatever you want
Hmm.
within reason. And Valve, who make the game Counter-Strike, is kind of known to be more in that world. Some of them are very restrictive. You can't do anything without getting a permission for every single tournament, every single PR. So they're on the other extreme, and then somewhere in between. One of the reasons I use Fortnite is because we're excited around what they're
Well, can I ask
doing.
a
Yeah,
small clarifying
sure.
question? So the independent influencers, the guys that have built businesses on Twitch,
Yep.
they don't need permission, right? They're
Well,
just going and playing a game and talking about it.
they do technically. They
Okay.
actually do. It just happens to be that most game developers have taken the stance of you immediately get permission, and at this
Mm.
case, influencers don't even really need to ask in most cases. Now, some publishers and some of the biggest ones, specifically Nintendo, their position on this is much more restrictive. So there are a lot of cases of influencers using that IP and it not being okay with them, honestly, right?
Okay.
And so, but as a general rule, streamers, YouTube creators, TikTok creators are able to use IP and monetize it, but that's only because the publishers have allowed it. They could shut it down in the same way you as a musician owning
Hmm.
the rights to a song may not give them the rights on Twitch or these platforms to use the song. So permission is needed.
Okay.
Most times it's granted quickly,
Or just by default.
or by default, by reputation. That's right.
I mean, truly a side note, and you only run into trouble when. So it's almost a corporate philosophy of Nintendo doesn't feel the need to grow via this kind of free advertising,
That's
but
right.
the other ones see value in it.
That's right. The majority of them see value in things like a live streamer or a TikTok influencer using it. And now when you start to do things like running a tournament, for example,
Okay.
they're uh, like for us, if we were going to run a community tournament around a game, most of these publishers have public community licenses that tell us, okay, if you stay within these parameters, maybe you don't need a license. But if you have more than $25,000 of prizing or corporate sponsorship, as an example, that might be a parameter where they're like, if you start to color outside those lines, and to your point, you're building a bigger business, there needs to be a conversation there, and probably they're going to ask for some level of participation or at least paperwork there.
Yeah, does it strike you as a little bit of a strange situation in terms of, I mean, if someone could come in to play, right, with a $10 million prize, and they were building, somehow they're having Steph Curry play against Taylor Swift, and let's say it's a $100 million prize, that the eyeballs on that are so incredibly invaluable to these game publishers that there's a little bit of a strangeness in terms of like the old adage, all publicity is good publicity, but they push back on it.
Well, I'm probably on a little more on that side because of my business incentives, but to kind of steel man the other side. At the end of the day, it is their IP, it's their characters, it's their copyrighted material. So they want to make sure it's represented correctly. They all have certain vice sponsor categories that will not be allowed. Like for most of them, pornography is not a valid category. Just recently, Riot Games with League of Legends actually opened up the betting category for their video game, right? So they're setting some of these macro rules around how they want their IP to be presented, and I think it makes sense. I mean, some of them are too restrictive in my view, but I get where they're coming from.
My kids seem to be playing GTA.
Okay. How old are the kids again?
Youngest is 20.
Okay.
She.
Yeah.
And playing with her older brother, 23. I suppose the beauty of a GTA is that you could have any sponsor of any type, and it's
pretty
absolutely
wide open.
And it's absolutely fine. Now that's a segue to bringing me to this next question, and I think the answer is going to be sort of it. It depends, but so you got this so much interest in this stuff, right? Competition, streaming. Where do you see how does this fit into the culture? And maybe that's too vague of a question, but where does gaming fit into people's lives?
That's a good question. I mean, it's in some ways it's by default so much a part of the culture, particularly for a younger demographic, really everyone other than like boomers, let's say, that it's by default a part of it, but it's strangely still under talked about in mass media, I would say, and still under leveraged by like traditional marketers, right? I mean, if you just look at the sheer numbers, again, when you've got 3.2 billion in the world and 250 million players in the US, and it's bigger than film and it's bigger than movies, I mean, by definition, if you're the biggest entertainment industry, you are part of the culture, but it's strangely still under talked about.
Do you want to throw up some of the data?
Yeah, let's do it.
Which one do you want to go with? The Minecraft versus MLB, or the sort of going across games and generations?
Let's see. Well, you got so many good data pieces here.
Well, we can talk about the brand stuff at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, so if we're talking about,
let's do this. Okay. So, what are we looking at here?
Well, so related to this question of where does gaming fit into the culture? And again, I think it goes back to one of the things you said. Well, it really kind of depends on the game.
Yep.
GTA 5 or the future 6, has a very different place in the culture than Candy Crush.
Yep. Or Minecraft. Yep.
Right. And so earlier this year, the Minecraft movie came out.
Yep.
And this was a phenomena, right? The movie industry has in some ways struggled since COVID. And suddenly I've got all sorts of people yelling chicken jockey. I don't you know I also, the Minecraft movie makes me think of the South Park episode where I don't know if you've seen it, but they're talking about, well, how do you make wood? You go in and you punch trees. you know, and so there's clearly this generational situation. And so when the Minecraft movie came out and it blew up,
Yep.
I pulled some data related to fandom for Minecraft. So I run this annual survey. We're in year 5. We go out and talk to about 2,000 people each time I run it. But the key is I do it across the generations,
Cool.
from Gen Z to the baby boomers.
Yep.
And so the way this exploded, I was just genuinely curious as to what did Minecraft fandom look like, and in the chart, you can see how it compares to Major League Baseball across the 4 major consuming generations: Gen Z up to about age 28, millennials to about 43, Gen X to 58 or 59, and baby boomers up to about 75.
I like this a lot. I mean, I think just, touching back to what we spoke of, I mean, Minecraft is so popular that my guess is if you did a similar study just around the broad category of gaming, right, it would look similar to this, gaming versus MLB, but what I like is it's specific.
The shape, not the
right.
not the rates.
No, that's right. The shape, the directional trend. But the fact that you chose a specific game, Minecraft, speaks to kind of what we kicked off with, which is, gaming is not equal to one sports, it's all sports, and now we're looking at a specific game, Minecraft, which is massive.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim to have any real insight. It was just that the movie came out. and in terms of the chart, I'm probably doing a little bit of cherry picking because as most Americans know, right, if you're culturally aware, baseball has struggled a little bit with younger generations.
But at the same time, if your data went to Gen Alpha, it would probably be even more striking, and directionally consistent.
Yeah, I can tell you. Sometimes I don't have it on the figure, but if I've often split Gen Z into old Gen Z and young Gen Z, and there are striking differences within that population. It's as a rule of thumb, I don't love these generational cut points because obviously a 27-year-old Gen Z has more in common with a 30-year-old millennial than they do with their 14-year-old. So if you look at like the group under 20, the trends actually really magnify.
Yeah, cool. Well, I like this because it's so specific to Minecraft. I like it also because it's showing fandom, I guess, like jumping from interactive video game to the movie theaters, right? Like a whole different form, right? It shows kind of that power of fandom and IP transferring.
I mean, even looking at this number, that number of 39% fandom for Minecraft and Gen Z. Now, I stare at these kind of fandom rate numbers a lot. 39% is massive.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a fragmented culture where, I mean, you look at just about any professional sport, it's almost like everything except for the NFL is a niche audience now. And so 40% tells me that, hey, guess what? This is something that is completely shared, almost entirely shared. Every Gen Z kid has played Minecraft.
Yep.
And so going back to this notion of community, all of these kids can connect over this.
Yep.
I can't connect with them.
Yep.
Right? But there's something that they all share.
Yeah. Now, without getting too wonky or academic or your secret sauce, like when you talk about like, okay, I'm a fan. I mean, there's some things I presume like they have played it, they know terminology, but just from a broad brush, I guess, how does someone like say, yeah, I'm a fan of?
You bring up a great question, and it's an impossible question.
Yeah.
So again, it's like we come back to this notion of a fan is a fan. We all know what fans are, but if I ask someone who if they're a fan, that's different than them being willing to spend their money,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That's different than them being willing to put on a Minecraft T-shirt,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I tend to keep the metrics as simple as possible in this,
Yep.
and this is just a simple question of on a 1 to 7 scale, how much of a fan of Minecraft or Major League
Cool.
Baseball are.
Got it. And you have some concept of like super fan. I assume they're like at the high end of that, or
So what I do is I'll say if you say you're a 6 or 7 on a 7 point scale, you're a fan. If you say you're a 7, then I'll designate
got
you
it.
as a super fan.
Cool. That's pretty straightforward. So
Yeah, and again, I'll 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 be very humble about the limitations in terms of the question in the survey,
yeah.
but I want to also be very straightforward about what we're. I could get really complicated, but getting complicated, I don't know if it would make it any better.
Yeah. No, it's pretty. I mean, the way you described it sounds pretty straightforward.
And,
So.
and again, just to kind of, to me, one of the striking things about this picture, right, is the way you look at the numbers for the baby boomers, and you know what? This is both genders. This is male and
Hmm.
female. That you quickly look at this and you realize how much society is changing. In the baby boomer generation, especially the male baby boomers, Major League Baseball was a shared cultural event.
Yep.
You come to Gen Z and it's really much less so, but now they've switched to this online world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is interesting when I think about it from gaming because I believe some of these patterns of people being fans of specific games, they're not going to slow down. We're just beginning. But, the question is, are there games, and if so, which one, that have, as a game, not as gaming, the longevity to be interdisciplinary? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
are we going to run this in 5 years or 10 years? And I know there will be a game that will be at least this popular. The question is like, is it Minecraft, right? So that's what makes this an interesting area. Like baseball, it's maybe dipping. It's been with us for a while, The long-standing games, I mean, maybe 20 years, some of them 30 years as a franchise, not quite 100 years. So,
Well, but why not?
no, I
Right?
think it's happening.
When we started this conversation, I mentioned this wild framework that L is
Mm.
life cycle, and I
Yep.
think there's two types of life cycle issues here. One is the IP, and the other is the customer or the fan.
Mm.
So how long does a fan stick with video games? How long is the IP relevant? And look, I think if I'm you, to me that's something that's absolutely fascinating. It's also keeping me up at night,
Yep.
right? Because I think back in the 1970s, people would have said, "Oh, they will be done playing video games by the time they're 18, by the time they become grown-ups." I don't know what the I don't know what the life cycle is
Yeah.
for the fans and for the IP. In some ways, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like, and again, get out of the gaming for a second. Sports are timeless,
Yep.
right? Those franchises go on forever. Pop stars might only stick around for Dexy Midnight Runners versus the New York Yankees, right? So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is something we think about a lot. I think that,
Who are the oldest gamers?
well, we have a couple on Ghost. Like we literally have a 71-year-old Navy vet who reps Ghost, who's
Okay.
an influencer with 400 million viewers on TikTok, and he's been gaming. He picked up gaming like from the very first video game, basically early 70s. He started gaming. So that's one with 400 million views to date. So yeah, I think big picture people sometimes slow down, but if they enjoy gaming in the same way if they enjoy watching sports, their consumption patterns might change, but they do continue to game and they want to game with their kids. But the real challenge is, can you create IP or be part of IP where it's not just gaming, but the specific game itself has that long lasting? And I think we'll see it. I mean, you started with storytelling. If you're creating original stories, we could do a whole episode on Marvel and DC, but those stories originating with comics have been with us for a long time, and they've gone into different manifestations of media, and now they're in games as well, but they stick with us, and if they're cared for, I think they have longevity. I think it's going to be the same.
Yeah, but I think this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
I think if you look at, and I've looked at some of the data, I don't have it with me today, that the Marvel skews much higher, does much stronger with millennials and Gen X, the people that were there for the original content, right? The paper content, and I think we're seeing some wear out in Gen Z. And now, here's the question for you. I think very often in fashion products, no one wants to wear the jeans that their parents are wearing. They don't want to drive Cadillac had a car brands, Cadillac and Oldsmobile might have been associated with older people, and younger people didn't want to drive it.
Right.
Okay.
Not your dad's.
Right. So does this happen in games? That's an old person game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I can't say that we've seen it a lot. Like I think about, again, another game that Ghost is really in is the Call of Duty franchise, right? I mean, it's a machine. Every year they have a new Call of Duty. They rotate between 3 different studios that make them. They're kind of the same with a little bit of a twist. It's not as old as some gaming franchises, but it remains popular for whatever reason and hasn't become less cool. But, I mean, it's a threat. It's something that I think game developers need to think about.
Okay.
But I think because it is an ever-evolving, often online platform where they can do updates, there's a way to keep things fresh. So,
how about let's go to the next chart.
Let's do it.
The one that has a bunch of the games.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, good, because I don't actually know how to have a conversation about this one. So what piques your interest? So these are the games that I surveyed in this annual Fandom survey, and then for reference at the bottom we've got the Fandom for esports, is whatever that word means to general respondents, and sports in general, and then it's cut by Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers again.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's informative is, again, esports. While we do a lot of esports, but again, being a fan of overall esports, a fairly small number versus
how did I do with my selection of games? I asked my kids.
Let me see.
And I tried to include all the sports games, all the bigger sports games.
Yeah.
Did I leave anything out?
The biggest one that you left out as we record this would be Roblox.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Roblox is the dominant game, and it's weird because it's like a platform of a bunch of games, and it has historically skewed younger, but it is dominant in terms of play hours. It would be interesting to see like the fandom level, because it's so many games. That would be in your next slice. It would be amazing actually to have that.
Now, and again, this is one of the things, is both the challenge in studying culture and what makes studying culture so interesting to me. I'm aware of Roblox, but purely from the outside. Like, I've heard people sort of talk about Roblox in terms of, this is one of the strangest things that's ever developed, where there's 12-year-old influencers making millions of dollars.
Yep.
So I have trouble getting my head around some of these
selling
things.
their grow your own garden seeds on the Discord black market as we speak. Now that's an actual thing, even though no one maybe knows what those words I just said were, but it happens. Yeah, Roblox is missing, and it's we should maybe do a whole episode on that, because it's fascinating. I mean, at the end of the day, but big picture, it's a game that really is a platform for user-generated content. And by the way, Fortnite is going in that direction as well. The new GTA will be very much in that direction. So there's a general idea to your fandom. It becomes interesting because we had gaming. We talked about that's just not one thing. Then you have Fortnite, Roblox, and then there'll be like subs within that. So.
And I don't know how to help me with the vocabulary on that. So it's like this push to, like, I want to push this to this issue of like lifestyle brands, because I think that's a very powerful concept, not just in fandom, but essentially everything. In some ways, I think all of marketing, all of brands are now in a race to become lifestyle brands,
Yep.
brands that give some identity benefits,
Yep.
and meaning. But when I sorry, just lost my train of thought there
Oh,
for a
that's
second.
okay. You were asking about like terminology for around some of this stuff, but
Um, so when you're talking about that, I don't know what the right terminology is. Are these games trying to become platforms? Are they trying to become lifestyle brands? Are they trying to become destinations? I mean, they're trying to expand to take on a broader community. So I guess
yep.
they're so. Are they trying
Yeah,
to?
I mean, I think actually you'll hear a lot of the words that you just said. You will hear platform, you will hear destination, and you will hear ecosystem. Because the
Ecosystem.
reality is platform, because there's a technology play. If I'm developing original content for Roblox, that's a very different set of skills and constraints than Fortnite. So that's like platform. But then destination, because all these have a social element, they're almost social first. I'm just going to go and see and hang out on Roblox or Fortnite because Mike's there, and that's what we do. And we don't go to the bowling alley anymore. And then we went to the neighborhood Casey's Arcade in Raleigh, North Carolina. Shout out! But now we're gonna meet in Roblox and Fortnite, and we'll just play whatever seems interesting at the time. So it's actually like the social graph is becoming important. But then ecosystem, because there's a store, you can monetize, you can buy virtual items. So any of those words are accurate. Ecosystem is ultimately what they're trying to create.
Our arcade was Galaxy World in
Nice.
Gala Bowling Lanes.
Okay.
And
What
again,
was your favorite? Well, just quick shout out to your favorite.
my
arcade
favorite game, not that I was ever even good at it, I always thought Defender was the coolest one.
Oh yeah,
The
so
way
many
the lasers
buttons.
shot across the screen.
Yes, I really sucked at Defender and Stargate. There were too many buttons, but it was good times.
Okay, so I want to come back to that before we leave this one. Is there anything else that sort of jumps out at you? I mean, like when I look at it, I see some demographic differences where Candy Crush is the strongest game with the baby boomers. Makes sense to me. But anything sort of jump off the page?
No, I mean that one does stand out in addition to traditional sports, and it is directionally right. I mean, you will often hear, which is accurate, that almost half of the gaming audience are female, but it's totally different. If you had gender through this, we would see some significant patterns. And so mobile platform,
I can bring
older
that for
women.
you.
Yeah, so Candy Crush is women above 50 is going to be the dominant player base.
I'll tell you something going back to one of your questions about how do you define fandom. There might be a lot of women that play Candy Crush that don't think of themselves as fans.
You're right.
Right.
I'm thinking players. You're right.
Yeah,
That's a good
and so
reminder.
it's an interesting, like almost across the board. When I break things down into female versus male, the fandom rates are always higher for men, regardless of the category. So there's some, and again, is it a sociological difference? Is it a biological difference? I'm not going to go down that path.
In fandom.
Yeah.
In general, you're saying.
Right.
Taylor Swift being a notable exception, I would guess.
You would be surprised at how strong, how relatively equal those fandoms are across men and women. And I do think it might be something like, yeah, I like Taylor, I'm a fan, right? Versus, and again, these kind of different metrics of, but are you willing to spend $1,500 to curate an outfit and go to her show?
Right. $300 to get in.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, cool. So we head to your final slide.
We can. I wanted to push you a little bit, not push you, but
Yeah.
a little bit more on the notion of lifestyle brands, because when we start talking about platforms, that also makes me think lifestyle brands, right? Because it's a destination. It's it's something people want to be affiliated with. And there's two. I'll ask first a real technical question on this. How many lifestyle brands can this industry have?
Gaming as well. Well, So there's a few ways to come at it. So again, I'll say there's the games, and then there's organizations like Ghost that are around the games.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked in the past, when we made games, including Smite, each one of those can be a lifestyle brand. I mean, I had probably no fewer than 20 people with one of our game Smite characters permanently inked, tattooed
Okay.
on them. That, I assume, is somewhere in your spectrum.
No.
At some point, like, that's a
Hardcore
fan.
display, right?
Right, that's hardcore display. Right. So, and that's your super fans. And so for those individual games that are creating IP, definitely they are, in your terminology, lifestyle brands. Now, I would say what Ghost is trying to do for a set of games is, at a high level, similar to the way Nike positions themselves around athletics, right? They're not in every title, but they're picking titles. They're picking ambassadors or influencers.
Okay.
They have an ethic around that they aspire to, and so
Well, let me back up,
Yeah.
because when I think terms like lifestyle brand are so overused and so used so frequently that they you start to lose some
Mm-hmm.
meaning. Let's change the terminology.
Yeah.
Let's call it an identity brand.
Okay.
So a brand that people want to have associated with that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, so Todd he's a media executive with 3 kids. He's 50,
Yep.
and he loves Ghost Gaming and the Atlanta Falcons.
Yep.
Right.
I got to find that third kid though. I'm not sure where that one is, but okay. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? So it's like the things that come out as the personality
Yep.
descriptors.
Yep.
So what's the potential for this category to get into those identity issues, right? As a young kid, as a high school student, they're introducing themselves. I love math and science. I love Fortnite.
Yep.
Like, what's possible? And then the follow-up question: how does it manifest when you get them to identify with it?
Yep.
What happens?
Yeah, these are all good questions we're actively working through, honestly. It's why I like these conversations. I mean, I think that maybe this will get to your question. Maybe it'll be a little sideways of it. But at the end of the day, there's belonging and there's thriving. And gaming, for many people, if they're in that fan or super fan, I would say as a general rule, one thing that's in common is, they found a tribe and people that get them, and other stuff wasn't their thing, right? They're not a casual, they're a fan or a super fan, and Fortnite is their thing, Call of Duty is their thing, and in my view, what they're getting out of that and what they want is belonging and a chance to thrive and like kind of climb the status ladder.
Okay.
And so our Ghost project at the end of the day is trying to give them an environment, sometimes in person, many times online, where they're part of this community and around like-minded folks where they have that belonging, but also there's like always something for them to aspire to. And that might be winning, that might be getting 1 million followers on social media, but that's kind of how we think about that.
Do you almost feel like in your profession that you've become a self-taught psychologist and anthropologist?
Yes.
Because as you're talking about that they find themselves in this community and they want to aspire for more status, I think if you look up the definition of a subculture, it will have notions that there's got to be this shared archive of stories, that there has to be this hierarchy, these sets of rituals and traditions, and the vocabulary that it sounds like you've sort of discovered just in the course of conducting business is completely symmetric to it, very much in parallel.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good confirmation. I mean, I think ultimately, my journey was like making tech, being a coder, then making a video game, which is really you're in the experience business. All the fun of the game ultimately is in a person's head. So good game designers are, they are psychologists. They're thinking about incentives. They're thinking about the subjective rewards, the objective rewards. So all that does go into game design. And now we're designing Fandom. And so, I guess maybe we have stumbled into this lane of thinking about those things and thinking about ourselves. I mean, I'm a gamer, my kid was a gamer, I see the peers, and so yeah, you want to have a tribe, and you want to have somewhat of a way to climb a
Yeah.
status ladder. Like that's what a lot of games are. Even every game on here, including Candy Crush, you're going through the road and you feel good because you just achieved something else.
Well, and look, and we can make this in parallel. If we're a professional football fan, there's a status ladder or a hierarchy of the person that knows all the draft prospects,
Yep.
who knows all the history of the team. Taylor Swift, there's a status ladder of the people that know all the lyrics, who know how to interpret the lyrics.
Yep.
Right, so a lot of interesting parallels in
Yeah.
this stuff.
Now, how many, the second part of your question is like, how many of these lifestyle gaming brands could there be? I think that was your question. And that, it gets into a whole other can of worms probably around physical geography or not. Like how much is Ghost a global brand, or how much is the heat coming from an area, which is Atlanta, which is a tack that we're taking, just borrowing from what worked in traditional sports. And so whether that's the right model for gaming or not is honestly way too early to know. But that's a tack that we're taking, which I wouldn't say other esports orgs are necessarily taking that same tact. But if it works, more lifestyle brands could exist at different levels of fandom because they've got some geographic center to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and it's an interesting conversation because there's so many layers to it and overlap on this stuff. This issue of, and again, this is something we've talked about in the past, and it's something I have, I love thinking about this question of how do you build a new brand, right? And so, we're sitting here in Atlanta, and there's a lot of talk of a new NHL team. Man, that to me that's the best marketing problem. That's like the holy grail of marketing problems. But when you start to think through it, and then coming to something like Ghost, the traditional avenue for sports was, hey, there was in Chicago, Mark Giangreco was on Channel 5, and he was essentially going to do a free commercial for sports for all the Chicago teams every time at 5 or 6. And there was a newspaper that was a free advertisement. There was a family tradition in terms of, your parents grew up as Yankees fans or Cubs fans. And so that geographic core where people were going to share their fandom for Ghost Gaming, well, for the Atlanta Falcons or the Atlanta Braves, that becomes really kind of a tricky thing, and I think in your business, because how do you make geography matter when essentially it's this online space? Like we've replaced the online geography with the local geography with the online space.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think you're right. Like the media landscape, not necessarily being limited to your local paper or TV news, it's fragmented, and I'm getting a direct feed globally on all these things. So I think while the media landscape has fragmented, and that's opportunity. It's opportunity for every brand to be a global brand, ultimately, because one piece of content can go viral, and now you got fans in Latin America. What still I think is relevant for a while are the high schools and the colleges.
Okay. So that's your geographic structure.
That's exactly right. For now, that's the geographic structure. There's, number one, the fact that at the highest level when events happen, they do happen in person, even though a lot can happen online. But when there's $100,000 and you want to prevent cheating, you bring people together. That is physical. And for now, high schools and colleges, that's a lot of young people, and they have physical institutions and locations, at least for now.
Yeah, and I think the difference is now for that physical geography, which again probably has to be the core ultimately, you've got to go at that with a different approach.
Yep.
Almost a that old school notion of a guerrilla marketing approach, boots on the ground. Because the other thing you mentioned is everyone can be a global brand. I think that's a trap in all this, because if everything can be a global brand, then what happens? Then everyone becomes a fan of LeBron James and Steph Curry instead of Trae Young having a pocket of power in Atlanta.
Right.
It's
winner take all,
and few
winner
winners. Take all.
Yeah, no, that's right. From a fandom, multiple brands. It's also from a practical, marketer's perspective. Ultimately, some of the way we make money is corporate sponsors, and if we can deliver an audience, you know, I mean, a couple brands could be global brands, but the reality is today most of these marketing decisions are made geography by geography. Like they're not controlling. At least I don't have the relationships of people that control the global budget. You know, so.
But here's kind of a strange question, and then let's go to the last slide.
Cool, I love it.
So, F1 in the Olympics, FIFA, these were the places to come at where there's a global brand, right?
Yep.
Are you a competitor of F1?
Huh. Well, someday, let's hope. But
well,
I mean, so.
But structurally, is that who?
Yeah, I mean, there are global entities in gaming and esports. You know, we're recording this around the time of the esports World Cup, which happens in Saudi, and like a lot of other sports, they're making a big splash, including $70 million in prizing, and clearly the positioning of that event, regardless of where they are, is to be the global destination and be a competitor. You know, for us, like candidly with Ghost, I'm much more interested in a North American audience in terms of where we're activating, where the heat is coming from Atlanta and Georgia to start with online. So that really is our goal, our inventory that we cultivate. Like when we look for, oh, you're a Fortnite influencer or a Call of Duty influencer, we're just practically looking for people in the US or Canada, and their audience might be global, but it's more going to be shifted to NA in terms of just our business plan. So,
makes sense.
Yeah, cool.
Do you want to throw the last slide?
Our final slide. It's been a good conversation. All right.
Okay, and so this one is, so when I full disclosure, like my title is marketing professor.
Yep.
But the part of marketing I'm interested in is the cultural part. And because to me that's where, look, you've chosen the same business. You work in an industry where people want to be.
Yep.
Right? The stuff that like adds vibrancy, the color to life.
Yeah, we're in the fun business.
The fun business, right? And I think there's a lot of that's where almost everyone wants to be. And so this last picture, there's a kind of sort of a deeper cultural story here. There's also a marketing story on this one. And so what we're looking at is segments of esports superfans. So the people that say they're a 7 out of 7 on when they asked if they're a fan of esports, and versus a segment of esports neutrals. So the people that are kind of like 3, 4, 5, and then asking them if they are fans of different brands. And so it looks like a standard marketing story of saying, this is a really great segment that you should go after esports fans. I think of it as a fairly deep cultural story in that if someone is a fan of something, how many other things are they fans of, right? So, and again, if I'm going to say community and identity when we do these episodes a lot, Todd, I'm also going to say engagement.
Yep.
So people that are engaged with one thing tend to be engaged with other things. It's like if you like parts of culture, then you like a lot of parts of culture.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this question of, are brands part of culture? And I argue absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot in here. So number one, the general trend here is like, people that rate 7s, at least in the esports world, they're fans of esports, and they're enthusiastic people across the board. They're enthusiastic people.
They're engaged.
People. Yeah. Now, one question that's not on here, but just based on recollection, like the correlation between esports super fans generally being more positive on these brands. Do you see kind of the same thing with fans in traditional sports or music? It's kind of a similar pattern.
It's a very similar pattern that if fandom is almost always correlated. And when I first started doing this survey, it was a little bit surprising to me. The people that were NFL fans had stronger fandom for musical theater than non-NFL fans.
Yeah.
The stereotypes weren't true, right? It wasn't, sort of me jock fan, me sports fan versus me cultural fans.
Yeah, some of the most hardcore esports players are the most into fitness, they just have that mindset, and
So people that are, I think enthusiasm, engaged, and so yeah, the esports group scores rates all these brands much higher, significantly higher than the esports neutrals.
Right. So
Uh,
this is good. I mean, so all these brands want to be and are a part of culture, to your
mhm.
point, right?
Well, some of the brand, I mean, Coca-Cola, Lululemon, Chanel. I've sort of cherry picked these brands, but these brands are all cultural brands. They're all brands that have some cultural meaning associated with them.
Right. Identity to your, the words you kind
Yeah.
of return to, right? You identify as an Apple consumer or not, right? So cool.
Well, you identify. I mean, some of the high performance. I drive a Porsche.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you hear that. You can imagine someone introducing themselves with that kind of with that kind of statement, or Budweiser, someone holding the can, or you could do the same thing
Yep.
with the Coca-Cola of like,
Yep.
I have a badge brand.
Right.
That sort of old school lingo on this.
Yeah. No, I like it. I mean, this is a helpful chart for my business, Mike. Because honestly, like what we talk a lot about is, while brands are relevant in culture, candidly, we think they're kind of neglecting or underinvesting in this audience. It's literally 5% of global media and marketing spend is going into the horizontal that is gaming.
Okay.
5%, even though it's the biggest. So feels like they're sleeping on an opportunity. Now maybe they would say it's a different audience, or it's complicated to navigate, but this at least is saying, okay, maybe you want to click into that a little bit.
I mean, and my reaction to that as a neutral
Yeah.
party is that if we go back to the very first slide and we see the engagement that Minecraft gets versus MLB, that again, there's a marketing implication of a broader cultural story, which is we're seeing a sea change in what people are passionate about. They're passionate about, and again, I think from our generation, video games almost had a bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't even know how would you describe that? It was sort of
There's a stigma.
yeah, get outside, do
Right,
something.
right.
But as I've gotten more into this world, I often find myself, and it'll be a later show, that thinking video games are actually sort of an interactive form of entertainment.
That's right.
Right, and so there's a real logic to people that are engaged with interactive entertainment. It probably explains why so many young men are fixated on gaming, because they're actually interacting. They're not just watching passively.
You nailed it, right?
Yeah.
Interactivity, even to step it up a little, agency. Every
Mm-hmm.
other media, I always say, is like lean back.
Yeah.
Movie, music, book. I'm passively consuming what the creator gave me. Gaming, lean in. Like, I'm literally the protagonist. I'm co-creating it as we go. I'm creating the story, which is, why it hits a lot of these trends with generations that grow up expecting interactivity. They don't expect to just watch TV. They're going to be chatting alongside what's going on, and that might affect the action. They don't expect to just have the story come to them. They want to drive the narrative. So yeah, gaming speaks to a lot of that, and that is culture, right? That's
culture.
expectation. So
Okay, how do you want to wrap this one up?
I mean, I think we covered a lot for episode 1. This was a fun conversation. I think we're gonna continue to do these, right? And hit other topics, have guests talking about their point of view. So it's gonna be fun.
I mean, that's my vision, and I'm sure we'll adapt and evolve as we go.
We will. We'll read the comments, and I don't know. How about
Todd? You can read the comments. I'm not brave enough.
I do gaming and esports. I'm very immune to negative comments.
I've had enough anonymous feedback for my entire life. Yeah, look, and again, I think we've got sort of very kind of interesting perspectives on this that overlap in a very significant way. I love the topic of fandom because I'm interested in how the world works.
Yep.
And I feel like that's what we're going to do here. And marketing, I think, often has a dirty word to consumers. But marketing is critical to where culture is going because now fandom is something that people are interested in actively managed.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, we're all fans of something, right? We're all
Hopefully.
fans of something.
No, I mean, it's worrisome when you meet people that aren't.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I guess if you're a fan of nothing, you maybe are at risk of being a little, I don't know, disconnected or not
Well,
just.
I would say it's like if you're a fan of nothing, then you're not passionate about anything in the culture,
Yeah.
which means you're not engaged with the culture. So it's almost a worrisome
Right.
thing.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think the world could benefit from fandom. It's just picking and choosing. So, all right. Well, let's close with any shout outs if people want to find more about what we're doing.
Okay, so you know what I'm going to do? I've started a Substack recently, and so throughout as we do these, if I ever show any data, I will put that data on the Substack.
Nice.
And so that's fanalytics.substack.com, and I'm sure we can put that in the show notes.
We will indeed.
And so if you want to find my writing, my Substack is more of sort of my lab for public scholarship related to fandom, the future of where it's all going to go. But especially for the show, all the data we'll put there.
Awesome. You might inspire me to do a Substack. But right now, it's mostly on LinkedIn and a little bit on X. And I'm Todd Allen Harris. Todd, A-L-A-N, Harris on both those platforms. So this has been fun, Mike. I look forward to the next one.
I should also say I'm also on LinkedIn, but I spend far, far less time there than Todd.
I'm a prolific LinkedIn user and poster, so be warned, All right, until the next one,
great.
right?
Thank
Thanks,
you,
man.
Todd.
All right.